Jared Kushner, as with everyone all the time who worked in the Trump administration, is now wanting it to be his time to release a memoir and make a bunch of money. So whenever you release a memoir and you're someone like Jared Kushner, who literally no one cares about, I'm kidding. Sort of. Nobody wants to read a Jared Kushner memoir. Let's say that. You have to put in some nuggets, right? Some interesting tidbits so that they get advertised on the news and then people go buy your book to see if there's anything else. Oftentimes, I'll advise you, if there's someone that you don't want to buy their book, but you hear really interesting things coming out of it, that's probably everything. Like, you'll probably read the book and be like, wow, the 5 things that were used to advertise while they were marketing the book were the 5 things that were interesting in that book. So don't worry about it if you get in that situation where you don't want to purchase someone's book because it's a bad person, but you are interested. So Jared Kushner, in his book, one of the big nuggets that was supposed to get a lot of interest on it was the fact that former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly of the Trump administration had shoved Jared Kushner's wife, Ivanka Trump, and Donald Trump's daughter, aggressively shoved her. But some people who were also within the administration, which, by the way, if that happened, that's horrible. Don't shove people. What the heck? But some people are contesting that account, namely Mick Mulvaney, who was also a White House Chief of Staff. Let's look at Chris Wallace break it down.
I'll tell you one really quick thing, because we all know, I hope I don't drive the control room nuts. We all know that oftentimes the conversation in the green room is more interesting than what's said on the air, the green room where we wait before we come on the air. I was talking with Mick Mulvaney. Jared Kushner's new book came up in which he says that John Kelly, the predecessor for him as White House Chief of Staff, shoved Ivanka out of the way. He said that is inconceivable. Could he have brushed by her? Yeah, inconceivable that John Kelly, White House Chief of Staff, would have shoved Ivanka. He also said in the book, Kushner claims that he told Mulvaney that he had thyroid cancer. Mulvaney said, he never told me that. Wow. I have no recollection of it, and if he had, I would have remembered it.
Where were you
when I was talking
show?
to Mick Mulvaney? Where were you when I was talking to Mick Mulvaney?
Okay, so a couple interesting parts about that. First of all, someone publicly coming out and saying that never happened is interesting. It doesn't mean it never happened, because Mick Mulvaney could be tight with John Kelly and just protecting a friend. And just saying that that's not within the character of that person doesn't really exonerate them in my mind. But him also saying that another random detail in the book wasn't true does start to take credibility away from Jared Kushner and the book as a whole, piece of work. And that was him saying, listen, in the book, Kushner says that he told me he had thyroid cancer. That's something I would remember. I have no memory of that. And so the fact that he's willing to come out and say there's another lie in that book makes me more willing to believe that maybe the Ivanka thing is a lie. Here's what I think actually happened. I think at some point there was an inappropriate physical event that happened. He was angry and stormed out of the room, and Ivanka didn't completely step to the side, and their shoulders bumped, and it was weird. And then Kushner kind of played that up to be him shoving her, which I think walk around someone don't at all. That can actually hurt, when someone's shoulders hit your shoulder. So it could still have been a bad situation, especially if he was doing it out of spite. And I think Mick Mulvaney is picturing it move. And he's thinking John Kelly would never do that. And so then there's kind of a conflict there where Kushner needs to play up this thing that sort of happened for the purpose of the book, and Mick Mulvaney doesn't want to have someone that he knew look bad, and so is kind of denying that anything happened at all. And again, I don't really imagine even John Kelly going out of rage shoving Ivanka, because he would have been, Ivanka's the one person that Trump actually has some level of love for, even if kind of a weird romantic one. And so that would have caused all hell to break loose, I think. But if it did happen, that's horrible. But I do think it was their shoulders bumped because one of them was walking in a direction and didn't move enough. And that's being played up a bit. But the Mick Mulvaney's trying to defend, Kelly's honor. And that's the situation we're now in. I don't really care at all about this. I mean, I would care if Ivanka was assaulted. That would be horrible. But I don't care about Jared Kushner trying to do a book and all these things. I just love whenever people who previously were kind of allies now have to publicly feud. And I'm curious to see how Kushner would respond to this. And then it's also interesting if he really is lying about the thyroid cancer thing, lying about telling Mick Mulvaney about the thyroid cancer. That's so random and so weird, because that's not like a juicy detail. Why would you randomly lie about telling a bunch of people you had cancer if you didn't, or telling one person that you had cancer if you didn't? I don't see the benefit. So that's also an interesting part of this. But then lastly, it was really funny. Chris Wallace, first of all, just seeing him on CNN is kind of weird. Now he's just a correspondent because his show on CNN Plus is no longer there because CNN Plus died. But him saying, you know, I don't know if this is going to anger the control room, but oftentimes the conversations that happen in the green room are more interesting than the ones on air. 2 points about that. First, definitely makes me wish I could hear more of those conversations, because you know, even people who feud on air backstage are like, haha, this is all, not backstage, but in the green room, kind of the waiting area before you go on the air, are kind of, you know, buddy and maybe don't care so much about these issues or are talking bad about other people. But then on top of that, it's interesting to think about, is he going without Mick Mulvaney's permission and saying that they had this conversation in the green room? Or do you think Mick Mulvaney was like, hey, I'm going to say this to you, feel free to say this on air because I want this to get out? Either way, that's interesting. Either Mick Mulvaney is kind of planting this, or Chris Wallace is like, you know, giving up a private conversation that he had with someone off air. So fascinating stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if Jared Kushner lied, and I also wouldn't be surprised if something inappropriate did happen. But overall, don't buy the book. Just another person trying to make money off of their name.